Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Florup with C-TRAN, and we're here live for an online open house to talk about proposed service changes coming up in the fall of 2023. I want to start by saying welcome to everyone who is joining us live on the C-TRAN Facebook page, or perhaps you're watching the recording afterward. Either way, thank you for taking the time to be informed, to make your voice heard, and for helping C-TRAN provide better service in Clark County. So today's event is part of a series of open house meetings C-TRAN has hosted recently, both in person and now online. Public feedback is a huge part of any significant change to our service, and your feedback is why we're here. For this fall, we're proposing a series of changes that will coincide with the launch of the Vine on Mill Plain, plus the opening of the new Mill Plain Transit Center in East Vancouver. Other local route changes would realign part of the network in that area and elsewhere. And we're also boosting service and improving connections. All told, the changes add up to thousands of hours in additional service each year. They also build on other recent service improvements we've made in the past year. But before we get into the details, I just want to set the table with a little bit of background. None of these proposals at this point is final. Concepts can and do change based on the feedback we hear from the public. Again, your feedback is why we're here for this event. There is another open house meeting coming up in May, plus a public hearing at the C-TRAN Board of Directors on May 9th. The C-TRAN Board will give final approval to these concepts likely in June. So to get into the specific details, I'm going to bring in Taylor Eit, who is C-TRAN's Planning Project Manager. Welcome, Taylor.
Good afternoon, Eric.
Now, as I mentioned, we want to hear from you. If you're watching us live on Facebook right now, you can ask your questions or share your thoughts in the comments of this post. Feel free to go ahead and drop them in now, and we'll get to them during the Q&A a little bit later. We've also set up an online comment form at c-tran.com that you can use at any time. We've heard from many of you already, and there's still plenty of time to be heard. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Taylor to go ahead and take us away.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks to those of you that are on with us today or watching this after the fact. We're looking forward to walking you today through the range of concepts that we are presenting for our fall service change, coinciding with the launch of the Vine on Mill Plain. Typically, we would have a date for when these changes exactly would occur, but because this service change will coincide with the launch of the Vine on Mill Plain, we're still working on exactly what date that will be, but we anticipate it being this fall, and we expect to know shortly. And once we know, you'll know. As Eric mentioned, we're going to walk through each of these concepts, and thanks for that summary, Eric. The concepts that we are going to look at today include the Vine on Mill Plain, new services or restructured service to Mill Plain Transit Center, new routes around that area, as well as a few improved regional connections that we're looking to put in place. The first of these concepts is the Vine on Mill Plain. The Vine on Mill Plain is proposed for implementation with a service very similar to the Vine that runs today on 4th Plain. For those of you that have not ridden the Vine on 4th Plain, the Vine uses larger stations with real-time arrival information, branded for the Vine service, and with service that arrives about every 15 minutes for the majority of the day, 7 days a week. We expect that the Vine service on Mill Plain will mean that buses will come more often on both Saturdays and Sundays, with 15-minute service added then as well. The Vine will operate along Mill Plain between Turtle Place and downtown Vancouver and Mill Plain Transit Center. We expect to implement a higher capacity service, so you'll be able to see the Vine branded buses on the corridor and board at the new station locations. The result will be a faster trip, more access to information, and a more comfortable experience while you're waiting for your bus. The next change that we're planning to implement is in regards to Route 30. Today, Route 30 operates between downtown Vancouver and Fisher's Landing Transit Center along Burton Road and 18th. We are proposing to reroute Route 30 to serve Mill Plain Transit Center rather than Fisher's Landing Transit Center along Southeast 1st, 177th Avenue, and 6th Way. There are not any anticipated changes to the frequency of the 30, which will operate as it does today. But we hope that this change will provide access to frequent connections with the Vinon Mill Plain, as well as connections to other services that will start and end at Mill Plain Transit Center. The next concept that is proposed for the fall service change is two new routes, routes 34 and 35. These routes are intended to provide service along corridors that are today served by Route 37. Route 34 will operate along 192nd Avenue and 34th Street, and Route 35 will operate along Mill Plain and 164th Avenue. These routes are intended to provide reliable and scheduled connections between the Vinon Mill Plain and Route 65 at Fisher's Landing, as well as Route 164, to provide connections across the river and into Portland. These routes will operate running approximately every 30 minutes during most of the day on weekdays, with a schedule that's offset from one another to provide frequent connections between the two transit centers. What that means is that Route 34 may operate at 9 a.m., 9:30, and 10 a.m., while Route 35 would operate at 9:15, 9:30, and 10:15. That would provide a connection between Fisher's Landing and Mill Plain Transit Center every 15 minutes. The next concept proposed for this fall is a change to Route 41. Today, Route 41 operates with select trips during the morning and evening commute between downtown Vancouver and Fisher's Landing along SR 14. We are proposing to extend Route 41 into Camas and Washougal, operating with service to select stops within Camas and Washougal. This would provide additional morning and evening connections between the Camas and Washougal area and Route 65 and 164 at Fisher's Landing Transit Center. We anticipate that this route will also be supplemented with service by the current during the same periods. Next, we are anticipating a change to Route 48. Route 48 today operates between 99th Street Transit Center and Junction Park and Ride in Ridgefield along I-5. We have two proposed changes for Route 48. The first is a modification to the existing schedule. Today, Route 48 operates once an hour during the morning and evening, and every 3 hours during the middle of the day. We are proposing to modify the schedule for Route 48 so that it would operate every 2 hours during the day on both weekdays and weekends. This will allow us to provide later service on Route 48. We're also proposing to extend the route north to A. This would provide service between 99th Street Transit Center, Ridgefield, Junction Park and Ride, and A, accessing opportunities to employment and other destinations in the La Center area, as well as helping to increase trip availability on the current in Ridgefield and La Center. The next change proposed for the fall service change is Route 74. Today, Route 74 serves East 4th Plain from Vancouver Mall Transit Center and operates a one-way loop along 4th Plain, 162nd Avenue, and Ward Road between returning to Van Mall. We are proposing to change Route 74 so that it operates between Van Mall Transit Center and Mill Plain Transit Center, providing a connection between the two transit centers. We are not proposing any changes to the frequency of the route at this time. although the schedule will likely change. This route will provide new connections between East 4th Lane and 162nd, which we've heard from many of our riders is an existing gap in the system, and we are happy to be able to have a proposal to increase access to jobs, employment, and commercial needs through the corridor. The final service proposal for the fall 23 service change is Route 92. Today, Route 92 operates between Camas and Washougal and Fisher's Landing Transit Center once every 30 minutes on weekdays and hourly on weekends. We are proposing to reroute the 92 so that it terminates at Mill Plain Transit Center, similar to Route 30. This will allow connections to the frequent Vine service on Mill Plain, which is where most of our riders on the 92 are connecting to today. It will also allow connections to other routes that are starting or ending at Mill Plain Transit Center, and will have timed transfers with routes 34 and 35 to help folks get to Fisher's Landing Transit Center along the way. We're not proposing any changes to the frequency of Route 92 with this change. It would still operate every 30 minutes on weekdays and once an hour on weekends, although you can expect the schedule to change slightly. And that is the complete list of all of the proposed changes for the fall 2023 service change. As Eric mentioned, we do still have one open house that will happen later next week. We look forward to hopefully talking with any of you that may want to attend there. And we welcome your continued feedback online, here in the chat, or elsewhere. And with that, I will turn it back to Eric.
Thank you, Taylor, for that summary of the fall service change concepts. So let's get into the Q&A portion of our online open house. For those of you who are watching us live online right now, feel free again to drop in your comments or questions in the comments of this post, and we'll address them as we go here. But to start, Taylor, I want to ask, I think, a question that's important to ask during any significant service change, and that is just in general at a high level. How does C-TRAN decide which routes to make changes to and which routes not to make changes to as you're evaluating service from year to year?
That's a great question, and that's something that we spend quite a while analyzing in advance of any service change that would have a significant restructuring to the network or a change that might impact riders in various ways, such as what is proposed for this fall. And that process really began a number of years ago when we started planning the Vine on Mill Plain. And during that process, selected to have that route end at a new transit center, Mill Plain Transit Center at 184th Avenue and Mill Plain. And part of that change is to help restructure our network to provide better support and connections for people traveling within the Southwest Washington region and maintain connections to frequent, fast, and reliable transit. And in this case, promote those connections with the Vine on Mill Plain.
Great. And then kind of related to that, I know we've seen this question come in a time or two in different ways between the new transit center being Mill Plain Transit Center and Fisher's Landing Transit Center, the existing facility down on 164th Avenue. How did C-TRAN decide which routes to realign to the new facility to make connections there? And how did we decide which ones to keep at Fisher's Landing as they are today?
Absolutely. Part of our decision making in determining what route will go to Fisher's Landing and which ones would go to Mill Plain Transit Center is looking at our existing ridership patterns and understanding where our riders are coming from and where they're going to help inform how we can make the best connections and where those connections should be made. We also try to identify opportunities to ensure that we're maintaining service where possible, where it exists today, and maintaining connections where they exist today. And in locations where a route may be going to a different place in our proposal from where it goes today, we look to offset that with connections, and if possible, make sure that those connections are timed so that a rider coming in on one bus can quickly and easily transfer to another bus, making it to their ultimate destination.
Great. So let's get into some of the comments we received ahead of the service or the open house today, excuse me. One of those came from Warren, and this is related to the same question of Mill Plains Transit Center and Fisher's Landing Transit Center. For those of you who may be just joining, Warren asks, Mill Plains Transit Center, will that replace Fisher's Landing Transit Center?
A great question. We don't expect Mill Plains Transit Center to replace Fisher's Landing Transit Center. Within the C-TRAN network, they both serve a different purpose. Fisher's Landing has a significant park and ride that is at times well used by many of our express route and or regional route riders, whereas most of the folks riding on our local services tend to access the transit center via our local fixed route and transfer to another local fixed route at that transit center. And with that in mind, we anticipate that both Fisher's Landing and Mill Plain will continue to play an important role in the C-TRAN network in the East Vancouver and Southwest Washington area.
Great. A couple of the comments that we received earlier. Lynn says, I really like the addition of Camas Washougal to the Route 41. Lynn, that's great to hear. That's good feedback. Ashley, on a related note, says, it would be amazing if the 41 went into Camas Washougal. Right now, I have to hope there's no traffic on SR 14 so that I don't miss my transfer from the 41 to the 92. Ashley also adds, the change to the 92 would also add service to the stop by my house and make getting to the Vancouver clinic much easier. And when they build that new town center near the clinic, so it will be convenient to get there. We are a one-car household, and I am so excited to see these changes. Ashley, that's great feedback. Again, thank you for weighing in and sharing that info. Another question came in from Lana. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And this is a question we heard from a couple other folks as well during our earlier open houses. Essentially, the question is, will Route 74 continue to have a stop at 4th Plain and 156th with the change extending it down to 162nd?
It will, yes. We anticipate that stops that were added just about a year ago on Route 74 serving the area around 4th Plain and 152nd Avenue will certainly still be served with this reroute to Mill Plain Transit Center. There is a potential that some of the exact locations of those stops might change, but there will still be service to the location.
Great. We do have a comment, it looks like, during in the comment section from Michelle Smith. She asks, I'm curious as to what the plan is with the routes going from Mill Plain Transit Center to Fishers via 164th and 192nd. The question is, why not just have one loop instead of two different routes?
That's a great question. And that's something that we analyzed during our process for developing these proposals. And it's certainly something that we are still open to feedback on. Today, we realize that there are different developments, destinations, and needs along each of those corridors. And by using two different routes, one serving Mill Plain and 164th and another serving 192nd and 34th Street, we can make sure that we are appropriately providing service for each of the destinations along those corridors while still making sure that generally the entire area is covered.
Great. So as we mentioned earlier, obviously a big part of this service change is the opening of the Vine on Mill Plain. We have a couple of Vine related questions I want to get to. One we received earlier from Herman, who asks, what will the time schedule be for the new Vine line on Mill Plain? Is it true that the 37 will be discontinued?
It's a great question. And yes, the Vine on Mill Plain will replace Route 37, although the entire stretch of Mill Plain, as well as 164th and 192nd, that the Route 37 serves today, will be covered by either the Vine on Mill Plain or Route 34 or 35, as we just referenced. Regarding the schedule, we're still working on the details of that schedule, so we don't have anything finalized yet. But we do anticipate that the span of service for the Vine on Mill Plain will be very similar to the span of service of the Vine on 4th Plain. And that's approximately 5 a.m. to 1 a.m. on weekdays and 6 a.m. to 1 a.m. on weekends. And for most of that time, the Vine on Mill Plain will operate every 15 minutes. So that's about 4 buses per hour.
Okay. Another Vine-related question we've gotten as well, with 2 segments now running in that system, how are people going to distinguish, or how is C-TRAN going to distinguish between the 2 Vine routes in naming or otherwise?
Well, for those of you that have ridden the Vine on 4th Plain in the past, you'll notice that each of the stations has a green icon at them. And if you've ridden recently, you might notice that the head sign or the digital display on the front of the bus has both green coloring and the word green. And that's a clue that we're putting out there for the fall service change as to how we'll be referencing each of these lines individually. And for those of you who may travel along Mill Plain, you might already have noticed that there are red icons going up along Mill Plain with the Vine on Mill Plain. In the future, we will begin referring to the Vine on 4th Plain as the Vine green line and the Vine on Mill Plain as the Vine red line.
Great. We're getting a few more questions in the comments. Dustin says, why was Battleground not considered for the fall service change? We do not have commuter service like we used to, and we don't have direct service to the Hazeldale Salmon Creek area as well as downtown. Dustin, that's great feedback and a great question. And, I would say to start that we have ongoing reviews to all routes, in our system. This is certainly not the complete package that we're talking about here for this fall, and we're already looking at potential changes for 2024 and beyond. And feedback like that helps us really kind of decide where those next steps are going to be, and where it makes sense to kind of build on what we're talking about for this fall. Taylor, anything to add to that?
No, I think you did a great job answering that. I'll just say that is really where your feedback and your comments are critical to making sure that we are able to get even more feedback on where our riders are headed, and getting these comments helps us create a better understanding so that we can develop potential service changes in the future that will help meet that need.
And Gina asks about the current. What is the plan with getting another current bus or another current service zone? Is that something
right now?
Go ahead.
Pardon me. Right now, we are still working on deploying the current as it exists today, and we're really happy with what we've seen so far. And from what we know based on rider feedback, many of our riders are happy and the current is working well with them. So our immediate plans are to ensure that the current is able to serve both Mill Plain Transit Center and Fisher's Landing Transit Center. And that's our most significant change in the near term. In the future, we will work to identify new areas where the current might be a viable alternative for our riders. So if you have a location in mind, definitely leave a comment for us so that we can make sure that we are, again, creating an understanding of how our service might be able to better help you move about Southwest Washington.
Great. A couple other comments. Looks like Eric has weighed in on the 74. Says, I love the new connection of Route 74 that bridges the gap on the east side. My only issue is I don't see a route that goes to the Ward Road and 162nd stop with that change. Is this going to be removed?
At this time, we are proposing that service would be discontinued along 162nd Avenue north of 4th Plain to Ward Road. So your closest stops within these proposals would be to either access Route 74 on 4th Plain and 162nd, or Route 72 on 152nd.
Okay.
If this is a proposal that you're interested in leaving feedback about, we're happy to hear that, because we do anticipate that there will be future changes, and that's somewhere where we may look to reinstate service in the future.
Yeah, and again, as we said off the top, none of these proposals is final, and this feedback that we get helps us not only for this service change, but also future route changes that may be on the horizon after this year. Looks like Michelle also asks about ridership on Mill Plain. Can you just talk a little bit, Taylor, in terms of how the 37 fits into the overall system, as far as how that route stacks up on ridership compared to others, and why that's the next one for the Vine?
Absolutely. Generally, Route 37 is our second highest ridership route in the C-TRAN network. And that happens on weekdays and weekends. So just about every day of the week, it's our second highest ridership corridor, just behind the Vine on 4th Point. And logically, the next step for where we would look to implement a similar high capacity transit service. You may have noticed that there are 60-foot buses, so our longer articulated buses currently operating on Route 37 today. While not operating the Vine style service, they are a way that we're able to better manage some of the higher loads that we see on Route 37 today. And using longer and larger buses consistently with the Vine will help offset that demand as well.
Great. Back to the 74, which seems to be a popular topic today. Linnadell earlier says, I definitely like the new 74 route. It will get me to work and back with less transfers. That's great to hear, Linnadell. Taylor, I want to ask another question that came in earlier regarding Route 48 extending to A. You mentioned that the schedule will look a little different on that route compared to what it is currently. Can you talk a little bit about what that's going to look like for riders in that area, and also how that fits into existing current service that operates in Ridgefield and La Center?
Sure. We anticipate that the current will operate once every 2 hours between 6 a.m.
Sorry, you mean
and
Route 48.
Pardon me, I do mean Route 48. We anticipate that Route 48 will operate once every 2 hours between 6 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekends, and between 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. on weekends. Pardon me, I may have misspoke there the first time. That would be 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays, and 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on weekends.
Yes, live video, gotta love it. And then as far as the current, how does that fit into the decision to make that extension on Route 48 based on existing travel patterns that we're seeing in the Ridgefield area?
What we're seeing today is that many of our riders on Route 48 are continuing to connect to the current onwards to A. And in fact, travel between Junction Park and Ride and A is one of the highest ridership trips that we see operated by the current. Hence our extension of Route 48 to serve that area to provide higher capacity service to meet those trip demands. What we've also heard is that in the evenings, people are typically coming south out of Ridgefield and La Center into the C-TRAN service area. And so by providing a later service, we're able to provide additional access and additional time for folks riding the current to make those connections.
Great. We're just about out of time, and looks like the questions have mostly run their course. So I just want to offer an opportunity, Taylor, any final thoughts or any other closing comments before we wrap up for this fall service change?
I'll simply say that we're excited to launch the Vine on Mill Plain, and we're excited for the opportunities that this network restructuring and associated service changes will provide for increased access to fast, frequent, and reliable transit in the East Vancouver, Camas-Washougal area. And we welcome your continued feedback on these concepts so that we can make sure that the changes that are proposed are working for our rider needs.
Taylor Eit is C-TRAN's Planning Project Manager. Taylor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you all.
So with that, we will wrap up our Facebook Live open house. I wanted to say again, thank you to everyone for joining us today. As a reminder, you can find a full list of service changes at c-tran.com. We also have a comment form there where you can weigh in from now through May 9th, which is the date of the public hearing before the C-TRAN Board of Directors. So again, there's still time to weigh in and let us know what you think. That's why we're here, and we appreciate everybody's feedback. So thank you for watching. Thank you for writing, and we will see you next time.